after Roosevelt's second term. One term he was elected, one term Kinley was assassinated. Taft ran and was elected president, and Taft's 4 years, they had a falling out. You know, Taft didn't pursue reform as aggressively as Roosevelt would have liked. And Roosevelt ran on the Bull Moose Party against Taft for Taft's second term, and it split the Republican vote, and Wilson was elected president. Any more? Yes.
I just have a little biography on Charles Howell, that he was born in Goshen.
I'll tell you what, I'll let you have the lectern and I'll sit
Oh, I don't
down.
want to. Here, thank you.
People can hear you better with the
You can all hear
microphone.
my mouth, can't you? He was born January 18th, 1848. He was 51 when he died. He was the chief engineer on the ship. He was injured, but he was pulled to safety and survived. Then he had a bout of malaria and eventually died of a stroke or heart failure on December 7th, 1899. His father was a wealthy landowner in Goshen, DeWitt Clinton Howell, and his mother was Jane Rowe Howell. And they lived on the Florida Road.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles.
But I appreciate it.
Charles will remain here, so if you think of some more questions, he'll be happy to talk to you. Now, true, the chief engineer on the Maine was, as Ann Roach had just said, was from Goshen. We found this out a few years ago. One of our members, George Miller, had been doing a project to locate every veteran up at Sleyfield Cemetery that he could find. He came to one of our meetings and he said, we've got a burial up there that goes right back to the Maines. And everybody seemed quite surprised, myself included. Indeed, he had gone to RPI, transferred to the Naval Academy. He was a graduate of the Naval Academy, and grew up in that area between the road, Gibson Road, Bosey's Road, and Houston Road, right in that section, probably right around where the old Borden farm is located. We do have a translation of a letter that he had written about the experience of the explosion. It happened about 9:20 p.m. He and other officers were in the officers' mess, which was higher up on the ship. The ones that were killed were those sailors that were down in the lower decks, either sleeping or mending the boilers or whatever their duties were. And the harbor there wasn't very deep, because when the Maine sank, it was part of the superstructure still above water. Now here's where I'm going to try to get into another connection between the Maine and Canada. Another one of our members, who was a vice commander at the time, Arthur Smokey Dresner, came to one of our Remember the Maine ceremonies that we held at the post, much smaller than this. It was members only at that time. And said his uncle John Everett's, wasn't on the ship, wasn't on the Maine at the time, but he was a deep sea diver. At that time, they didn't have scuba gear. They used that hard hat, the bronze hard hat, and he was one of the sailors called in to the wreck. Time for a commercial. What have you got in your wallet? Right? You see that on Capital One? Well, at that time, nobody had plastic cards in their wallet. And when the ships went to a foreign port, as Mr. Breiner had said, they purchased coal. No gas stations along the way. They purchased coal where they could. They had to buy fresh water, some fresh foodstuffs, and other supplies. No plastic. Couldn't charge it. They didn't want to, many of these countries didn't want us to take a check. Probably didn't even want to take greenbacks. How did they pay for it? These ocean-going Navy carried gold and silver bullion to pay for these supplies in other ports. So John Everett's was dispatched to the site of the Maine and was one of the divers that went down, and his mission was to recover the ship's log, which was the record of what had happened hour by hour on the ship. Would be important for investigation and so forth. The ship's log and the gold and silver bullion that was on board, which he did. Now, 4 days before the Maine blew up, John Everett's was on a torpedo boat, small fast boat, in and around the Keys, Florida Keys. That was the Cushing, SS Cushing, or whatever letters designated the size of that small boat. And like I said, 4 days before, which would have been February 11th, in high seas, a ensign, an officer on that boat, fell overboard. Everett's and a mess attendant dove in to attempt to save the ensign. He was recovered, but swallowed too much water, passed. For that action, John Everett's was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. A couple more things. John Everett's was born in Theobald, Ontario. He's originally from Canada before he came to the States and joined the Navy. Connection. Also, being a young fella at that time, John Everett's must have been down looking around, doing his search and so forth, and he came across the ship's ensign and ship's pennant. The ensign is the main flag, the primary flag, not to confuse Maine with the Maine. Primary flag flown on aboard ship. The ship's pennant is a long, skinny flag that is awarded at the commissioning ceremony of a ship. He recovered those. He wasn't sent to do that, but he recovered. Stuffed them under his jumper, took them home. Probably would be considered a no-no. Flash forward to 1956. John Everett was up in age, suffering from some frailties and so forth, and he wanted to give that flag and that pennant to either Smokey Dresner, World War II vet, Navy vet, or his son. They were both had been in the Navy. Both of these fellas says, that's Navy property. No, you're not going to give it to us. So they had contacted the Navy Department, and there was a ceremony down at the Brooklyn Navy Yard where these two items were returned to the Navy. Coincidentally, Brooklyn Navy Yard is where the Maine was built. These items made full circle. I think it was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy took charge of it and handed those two items off to the then Governor of Maine, later Senator Muskie. And they went up to the Maine State House. I had been in touch with the Maine State House. They do have the flag stored in some back room someplace. They claim that they don't have the pennant. May or may, they didn't look far enough, whatever. I wanted to get a photograph of that flag, which would have been a 48 star flag in 1898, to show today. But the curator of the museum up there just sent me back a form saying, yes, we can get a photograph of it, but it would cost $160 for the snapshot. That's where the state of Maine and I parted friends. Nonetheless, John Everett gave those artifacts back to the Navy on February 15, 1956, and died, I think, in September of that year. He's buried out in Long Island at the National Cemetery. They took, in that ceremony, they took great care of him and honored him, probably because he had the Congressional Medal of Honor. If he was just Joe Slob sailor, they probably would have tried to lock him up. But that is a connection between Canada, where he was born, and the Maine. Further, on going back to Charles P. Howell, there are a couple of pictures available on the internet of Charles P. Howell. I believe one of them was taken by his brother. His brother was William Rowe Howell, who died in 1890. He was a photographer, at one time quite renowned. He had won some big photographic prize in France, Paris, I believe. And he was a sort of a rascal also. At one point he abandoned his family and disappeared for a couple of years and then came back, and well, probably the black sheep of the family. Now, let's see if I can make this work a little bit. This would have been a painting of the explosion. No photographs taken right when it blew up. Here's the artist's rendition. Now, just below the stack that is tilted over to the rear, you can see one of those outboard turrets. That would be the front one, which is the starboard side. And yes, indeed, they made the ship ungainly and off balance. Also, another reason that they quit doing that in echelon mounting of the big guns was that if the ship wanted to fire a broadside to one side, one of those would be firing directly over its own decks. And I suppose the sailors on deck didn't care for that too much. It was commissioned as a heavy cruiser, ACR-1, and I believe the Olympia was also had an ACR, but I don't know what the number was when it was first commissioned. Let's try another picture of it going up. This is the way the wreck of the Maine. You can see, even though it was sunk, it's sitting on the bottom. There's this much of the superstructure still above water. It didn't sink deep water. They raised it again in starting in 1909, I guess, until 1911, and finally towed it out and opened the sea docks. And they had built, to get it afloat, they had to build a caisson, a wall pump the water out, patch up the holes as best they could to tow it out. And so there was, that time, it was a deep, a mile or so deep water, and that's the end of that. The country was very patriotic right there at during the Spanish-American War and afterwards. There were a lot of souvenirs made of the Maine, teacups and plates and pins and gosh, if you Google USS Maine on eBay, you'll see many things that are for sale. Now, let's try another one. Charles Paulides Howell, I don't know correct pronunciation of his middle name. This is his photograph that I believe that his brother would have taken, and a photograph of his gravestone, the family gravestone, up on Slate Hill Cemetery. Should you want to find it, and go in the entrance to Slate Hill Cemetery, as you drive in on a straight park, just as you're starting to make a right-hand curve, and look all the way up on the hill, you'll see the back of one of the houses up on the hill, and it's almost in their backyard. Howell Stone, his father and mother are, and that's brother William, are also buried there. Now the stone does have Charles Howell's wife's name listed, but date of death is not. I don't really think she was buried in Goshen. She died in 1937. And I don't think she probably got along with her mother-in-law. But Charles's mother insisted that he be buried in Goshen. He's a Goshen boy, he's coming back to Goshen. They wanted to bury him down in Arlington. She said no, put a foot down. And for the funeral, there were 2 companies of Marines that came up from the Navy Yard in New York City to accompany the funeral procession. And of course, by then the railroad had come to Goshen, and it was easy for them to come up. Going back to John Everett, born August 25, 1873, in Thorold, Ontario. He immigrated to the United States and was living in New York City when he joined the Navy. He was serving as a gunner's mate, 3rd class, on the USS Cushing, on that date when he attempted to save the Sensen. Oh, by the way, maybe it sounds a little strange that you got a Congressional Medal of Honor for trying to save the Sensen, but the ensign's father was an admiral in the Navy, so there's probably a reason that he got the Congressional. And he died at age 83 and is buried down at Long Island National Cemetery in Suffolk County. This is the prayer card of Charles Howell's widow. Stone again, stone again. Back to. Now this is a picture of the ceremony when that flag was returned at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, 56. And as I mentioned, it was in 1896, it was brought up to 45 stars. And now one of our friends, Walter Kloszowski, sent me this picture. In Scranton, Pennsylvania, there's a monument in a park to the Maine, and that's one of the shells that was salvaged from the Maine atop that monument. Down in Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, on the Booton line, there's a small triangular park where 3 roads come together. They have a funnel from the Maine, big, like a speaker horn on the old Victrolas, quite large, that would force air down into the below decks when the ship was underway, and then there would be corresponding one further back on a ship pointed the other way to create a draft and give those sailors down there some breathable air. So all across the country there's monuments and parts of the Maine. Now, let's see here. The heavy white bag. You left it back there? Yeah, right. VFW Post 973 over in Newburgh has this plaque, and it is made from metal salvaged from the Maine. And there's a series of these that were built, like maybe originally 1,000 or 1,200, and they were sold at that time. So put it up here on the table. You can come up and say that you touched part of the Maine. It was originally given to the Spanish American veterans group that preceded the VFW, and then when that group folded into the newly formed VFW, that plaque was turned over to them. And it's the second time we've had it come over from Newburgh to Goshen. So we quite happy to show it to you here today. It's rather neat. And something else I was going to tell you. Any questions for me? Probably have more for Charles. Okay, then we'll break. There are refreshments in back. Charles will be here. I'll be here for whatever I might be able to. Oh, you got a question? Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
wanted to say something here.
Please.
My name's Bob Breiner.
Right, I'm sorry,
I'm from
Bob.
Chester, no problem. From Chester, and I'm one of many representatives of the Hudson Valley Honor Flight. If anybody in the room that are veterans or have family members that are veterans, I have business cards here. And that allows the veteran to sign up to be part of the program. Those of you that are familiar with Honor Flight know that we take flights from the Hudson Valley at both Stewart and also over in Westchester County Airport, and we take the veterans at no cost to the veteran down to Washington D.C. We take them to the World War II Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, and the Korean War Memorial. Then we take them to Arlington National Cemetery for a special presentation with the changing of the guards doing the unknown soldiers at no cost to the veterans. We're doing outreach just to reach as many veterans, especially World War II and Korea War veterans. And I have cards there, and I'll give you the email, not the email, but the website. It's information at HV-HudsonValley-HonorFlight.com. And I have cards if anybody's interested. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was, had the honor of being on an honor flight, and my daughter Tina, who's over here on the end, was my guardian, and it was one of the best days of my life. I highly recommend it. It really was an experience.
I was a guardian on the first flight, and it was some experience.
Yes, Han.
What was Howell's service after the Maine?
He was assigned to a ship named Newark for a short period of time, and then he was assigned to shore duty at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and he died in New York City later that year. He died in '99, so he didn't have a long naval history after the sinking of the Maine. It was
The Newark was in China in 1905,
Yeah.
in the Boxing Rebellion.
And one other thing that Teddy Roosevelt, I believe when he was running for president, the first time he got to be president was when McKinley was shot. But he was on a speaking tour campaigning, and I believe in Montana, in a saloon. The saloon keeper shot him. Maybe he had reason, I don't know. But McKinley had his speech in his pocket and a glasses case, which took most of the impact of the round, but he's still wounded. And Teddy Roosevelt did his speech and then let him be taken to doctor for medical care. So he was a tough cookie. Okay, we'll stick around for, there's a,
If anybody's interested, the local history room will be open for about a half hour.
oh, super. No charge to get in. It's upstairs. Take the elevator, plenty of free parking. Okay, can I ask you all to stand for a moment of silence for those that were lost 122 years ago? May they rest in peace. Our group turned out on this rather chilly morning. To start off with, we of the Goshen VFW mark, and in fact all VFWs, mark February 15th as the start of the VFW. That's the oldest date that anybody qualified for membership in the VFW, which was the incident that precipitated the Spanish-American War. So it goes back to 1898. And before we start, I'm going to ask all those that can stand, please rise and join us in the salute to the flag. Veterans, hand salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. I'm going to be bouncing back and forth a little bit, trying to tie in the VFW, the sinking of the Maine, and Goshen, along with a connection to Canada. Sounds a little confusing. Maybe it'll get more confusing before we're done. When we first started our post here in Goshen, that was in 1975, we didn't have a place to meet. We met in any room that we could find unlocked in Goshen, whether it be the back room of a bar, the firehouse, a restaurant, so forth. After about 4 years, one of our members, Freddie Walker, who was the chief of the police here in the village at that time, his wife Seal was the village clerk, brought us some information saying the village board was sick and tired of seeing the dilapidated condition of the brick caretaker's house as you drove in on the this morning. Library on the right, that house is on the left, and was part of the original Haight estate here. Many people refer to it as the Salesian property, but it was originally the Haight family estate. And the village board was about ready to knock it down and get rid of it. It had been vandalized, it was vacant, and so forth. Through the auspices of Chief Walker, we were able to contact the Haight Cemetery Association, Mr. William Haight, and we, over a period of a couple of months, negotiated a caretaker's lease if we could indeed rehab the building to the point of getting a certificate of occupancy, occupancy, and from then on, maintain the building in good repair, the grounds, which is a little over 2 acres, clean that up, maintain it, and keep insurance on the building, and pay the utilities, of course. It worked out for both the Cemetery Association and for the VFW. We were using that building for something over 25 years. While we were rehabbing it, one of our members, Charlie Bowman, World War II submarine veteran, corresponded with Canada, the veterans groups up there, because we had found on a tour that Mr. Haight gave us of the mausoleum, there was a marble plaque on the wall to the memory of Benjamin Merwin Haight. And we asked Bill Haight why it was there and so forth. And he explained it was his older brother. He was Canadian, as many of the Haights were. They had made their money in the fur trading business and later in the hat business when men still wore beaver skin fur hats. But this Benjamin Merwin Haight joined the RCAF, the Royal Canadian Air Force. He, as a flight sergeant, flew the Mosquito twin-engine fighter bombers. And unfortunately, he was killed in the Battle of Britain in March or April of 1943. So in corresponding, Charlie Bowman had gotten more information on the 410th Fighter Squadron that Flight Sergeant Haight was a member of, and they were so taken with the interest from down here that they donated this flag to us. Reason of bringing it out and showing it today is February 15th is also Canadian National Flag Day. And I thought it would be apropos to tie that in, and we'll have a couple more things to bring up later on connection between Goshen and Canada. But wanted to show you that and make note that today is Canadian National Flag Day. I can't say in French the right pronunciation of the French term for that Flag Day up there. It's something like Jour de Drapeau ou National Canada. But I have no background in French except for spending a year in French Indochina. And I didn't pick up any French at that time. Thank you, fellas. So, what our main program is today, the main program is on the Maine. We have displayed here the scale model of the Maine that was constructed by Richard Cobb, a classmate of mine from here in Goshen. Spent 4 years in the Navy, but he was never on a ship. He spent 4 years in Iceland at Keflavik Naval Air Station. I find that while he was there, the Viet Cong never set foot on Iceland. He claims he did it. Okay. That's to 1/87th scale, the same scale that HO Model Railroad is done at. And he did it from blueprints that we had gotten from the Department of the Navy. And took, it's not a kit, he did it from scratch. So before you leave, if you haven't seen it already, please take a look at it. Now, our speaker today is Mr. Charles Breiner. He's come down from Claryville up in Sullivan County. He says it's warmer down here than it is up there, but I don't believe it. He's a military historian, and if I'm not mistaken, his working career was at Middletown, at the state hospital.
Right.
Okay, so he does know Orange County.
I grew up in Middletown.
He grew up in Middletown. Okay, it's yours, Charles.
Central Hudson had a little problem with a massive power surge, and Wednesday night, and my computer burned up. So I had my notes and stuff in it, so I'm winging it today. I might need a little help with some dates, but I think we can pull it off. What I'm going to talk about is the Spanish-American War. This was a war that nobody wanted. President McKinley didn't want it. Industry did not want it. The Republican Party did not want it. The Democrats did not want it. Spain did not want it. How did it happen? Well, I'm going to start with the election of 1896, when McKinley ran for president against William Jennings Bryan. McKinley and Republicans wanted to run on the tariff issue. They wanted strong protective tariffs. William Jennings Bryan, however, determined the course of the campaign, that the campaign was about free silver versus gold. William Jennings Bryan was very popular in the Midwest and West, where the farmers would borrow money and mortgage their farms in the spring to buy their seed and whatnot. And then, God willing, if the rain was right and the crops came in, they could pay their mortgage off, and so on until the next year, when it would repeat itself. So the issue for them was cheaper money. They wanted to coin silver. Industry, the Republican Party, wanted to maintain the gold standard. And it was a very vigorous campaign. Teddy Roosevelt, who was a central character today, at the time was police commissioner in New York City. And he earned quite a name for himself. He did a lot of things that were not popular with the politicos in New York City. He enforced the law. He would make rounds in the night to make sure that his patrolmen were doing what they were supposed to do. If they were sleeping or not where they were supposed to be, they were called into his office the next day and severely dealt with. Another thing he did was there were Sunday blue laws where the saloons could not be open on Sundays in New York City. But they all were, or most of them, and they paid off Tammany Hall and the local politicos to remain, and the local cops on the beat to stay open. On Sundays, Roosevelt changed all that. He made the police enforce the law and close the saloons. This was not popular because this was the day when the average worker worked 6 days a week. He was off on Sunday and would enjoy spending part of the day in the saloons. That was his only recreation. So this was not popular. Anyway, when McKinley was elected, McKinley recruited Teddy Roosevelt to be what we would call today an attack dog. And he traveled through the Midwest and the West, savaging William Jennings Bryan, and was very effective at it. McKinley won the election. Teddy Roosevelt requested that he be appointed as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. McKinley was reluctant to appoint Roosevelt because he felt he was kind of a rabble-rouser and a troublemaker, but there were a number of people that took Teddy Roosevelt's part in this, one of them being Howard Taft, who was a judge in Cincinnati and active in the Republican Party, friend of Roosevelt's. So eventually McKinley relented and against his better judgment did appoint Teddy Roosevelt as Assistant Secretary of the Navy under John Davis Long. John Davis Long was elderly and a little bit lazy. And in this period of time, the federal government in Washington almost shut down. The congressmen, the senators, they all left for the summer. John Davis Long would leave in May and stay to the end of September up in Maine, as usual. But Roosevelt stayed behind in the Navy Department and took over. And at this time, too, there was a lot of competition with newspapers. Pulitzer and Pulitzer, the other newspaper,
Hearst.
right? Yes. There was a lot of competition. So there was a revolution going on in Cuba at this time. And the Spaniards were really brutal. They had concentration camps where they interred a pretty large part of the population, not unlike today. And the press was ginning this up and in support of the Cuban people, yellow journalism, and was creating public opinion very sympathetic to the Cuban people. However, nobody really wanted war except Teddy Roosevelt. So during the summers when John Davis Long was up in Maine, Roosevelt made sure the Navy was well equipped. He made sure that they stayed, kept their coal colliers full on their ships. He made sure that they had lots of ammunition, which he ordered, and he ordered the Navy to have extra gunnery training. So that when 1898 rolled around, the Navy was well equipped and well prepared. Anyway, the press was getting up so much public opinion that McKinley finally ordered the Maine in January of 1898 to Havana Harbor, which was welcomed by the Spaniards. February 15th, 122 years ago from today, in the evening, there was a massive explosion on the Maine and it sunk in in Havana Harbor with a large loss of life. I think there were 192 people, something like that.
More.
Maybe
sometime
more,
later, yeah.
that were wounded. Well, that's killed and many more wounded. The Spanish were great help. They worked to recover sailors. They did their best to help treat them. The admiral of the that was commander of the Maine was very grateful for the help he received from the Spanish, from this man. Roosevelt and the press immediately blamed the Spanish for sabotage, blowing up the Maine. The Spanish denied. They said they didn't do it. But public opinion was so aroused that in April, the Congress declared war on Spain. The Navy, Admiral Dewey, who was in command of the Asian squadron, had filled his ships with coal, was loaded with ammunition. He was ordered immediately to proceed to the Philippines and destroy the Spanish Asian fleet. And thus we had the Battle of Manila Bay. It really wasn't much of a battle. The Spanish ships were anchored in a line. One of their ships didn't even have power, it was broken down. And the American gunnery was far superior to the Spanish. They never even had to sail within range of the Spanish guns. They just sailed in a line up, shelling the Spanish fleet, sailed back the Spanish fleet, and the Spanish fleet was pretty well destroyed. It was either sunk or disabled before they surrendered. They landed Marines in Manila, and they took possession of the Philippines. Now, the battleship Oregon was in the West Coast, and they needed it badly to be in the Atlantic because the Spanish Atlantic Squadron was headed for Cuba. So the Oregon went down the West Coast of South America, through the Straits of Magellan, back up to Miami to join the rest of the fleet. And wouldn't make it. This was a sensational story in the papers of the day. Whenever the ship was sighted in a South American harbor to take on provisions, it was reported in the press. Would they make it? Well, the sailors were busy on the trip. They painted the ship for combat navy gray from white. They had one collier that was full of anthracite coal. They took the bituminous coal out of the bunker that was closest to the engines and moved the anthracite into that bunker, so when they got into combat they could use the anthracite coal, which would burn hotter and generate more power. So all this was done on that trip to South America, and it dominated the news of the day, what the progress was of the battleship Oregon. Well, it didn't arrive in time. It fought the Spanish Atlantic Fleet in Santiago Harbor in Cuba, and the land battles were really quick. The Rough Riders were sent to Cuba, but they didn't have transportation for their horses. So when they arrived in Cuba, they fought as infantry. Although Teddy Roosevelt had a horse, he recruited the Rough Riders. They were all buddies of his. Some of them were from Ivy League colleges, universities, some of them were polo players, and it had a mix of his friends from the West, cowboys. It was quite a group. And he got a lot of press. He, McClure's magazine at the time covered the war and had reporters. One of the main reporters was Ida Tarbell, who, when she first met Roosevelt, she did not think much of him. She thought he was a warmonger, which was correct. He advocated the war from the very beginning. The Rough Riders fought. They didn't go up San Juan Hill. They went up to a smaller hill that was right next to San Juan, and Roosevelt led the charge on a horse, and they routed the Spanish off of Kettle Hill. The U.S. regulars, and it was a U.S. colored regiment that actually took San Juan Hill. And then they went on to fight the Battle of Santiago, and this took place in July, and that was the end of the combat in Cuba. The Spanish surrendered. Peace was signed in August or September, I believe, where Spain gave Cuba their independence. Spain ceded the Philippines to the United States. They did get a cash settlement for infrastructure as part of the treaty. And McClure's magazine very favorably reported on Roosevelt's service in Cuba, and he was a well-known national figure after this. Excuse me. Roosevelt went on to become governor in New York State. He continued to make himself a real pain in the rear end as governor, wanting reforms. Both the Democrats and Republicans wanted to get rid of him. Mark Hanna, who was then head of the Republican Party and also majority leader in the Senate, convinced McKinley and the Republican Party to run Roosevelt as a vice president, just to get him away out of New York. And because in those days the vice president did nothing. Well, that happened. Roosevelt really wasn't very happy as vice president, but McKinley went to the World's Fair in Buffalo, was shot by an assassin, and died a few days later. Roosevelt was hiking on Mount Marcy in the Adirondacks when word was sent to him that he was now president. Mark Hanna said now they went and made that damn cowboy president. So that was Roosevelt. Now, what sunk the Maine? Immediately the press and Roosevelt, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, blamed the Spanish. The Spanish denied it. A Navy investigation subsequently determined that the ship was sabotaged by a mine put under the ship. The ship was raised out of Havana Harbor. It was taken into deeper water and sunk. The two masts were recovered. One mast is in Arlington National Cemetery, where many of the graves of the sailors are. The second mast was taken to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, and they're both there today. Admiral Rippover did an investigation on the Maine. Much more modern technology was available, and he determined that what caused the explosion on the Maine was coal dust and a spark in one of the bunkers, and that exploded the Maine. That most likely is the cause. It's debatable, it's still debated. But as I said before, Spain did not want war. They had no reason to blow up the Maine and provoke the United States. Just the opposite. I think they were probably horrified, knowing that this was probably going to provoke the United States. So they really had no reason to sabotage the Maine. So at this point, I'll be willing to take any questions that anybody might have. Yes.
That expression, remember the Maine, I assume the newspapers kept publishing that phrase.
Yes. They say the Spanish were blamed at the time in the press, and Roosevelt blamed the Spanish right away. And that investigation that the Navy did determined that the Spanish did it. But if you were doing an investigation and the press was screaming for war against Spain, and your boss, Assistant Secretary of the Navy Roosevelt, was saying that the ship sabotaged by the Spanish, would that have influenced the investigators? Any other questions? Yes.
Were the Buffalo soldiers involved in the fighting?
Yes, they were. I believe it was one of those regiments that was San Juan. I know it was a U.S. colored regiment that took San Juan Hill, a regular unit. So yes, they were in the war. I will add how the Army expanded. There were what was called separate companies. In Middletown, the Army was headquarters of the 25th Separate Company. And they would drill, they'd have meetings and they'd drill. They also did a lot of sports. They played basketball, had a league in the winter, and then baseball in the summer, and they would drill. These units were equipped with black powder rifle muskets from the Civil War that had been converted to breech loaders. And when the war broke out, these separate companies were taken, there was one in Newburgh, one in Kingston, one up in Walton, all over the state, and they'd take several of these companies, and then they were given a New York State regiment number, much like the Civil War. And the 25th Separate Company spent the Spanish-American War in Hawaii. Middletown. Not a bad assignment. One problem that surfaced during the, a couple of problems with combat in Cuba was the separate companies that were involved had these black powder muskets from the Civil War, breech loaders converted, and black powder was very dirty and created a lot of smoke. The Spanish were equipped with German Mauser rifles, which was cordite, smokeless powder. So they were at a disadvantage. The United States troops, regular and otherwise, wore wool uniforms in the Cuban heat, and they were down there fighting in July. Malaria, dengue, yellow fever were big problems. Put more troops out of commission than combat did. Incidentally, as I said, Teddy Roosevelt was lieutenant colonel of the Rough Riders their colonel was Leonard Wood. And there's a base name for him. He was a physician.
Missouri.
Yeah.
Boston Woods, Missouri.
Yep. Yep. And what impressed Roosevelt too was the trip to the Oregon. It definitely made in Roosevelt's mind necessary to have a canal through the Isthmus of Panama, because at that time the United States did not have a two-ocean navy. And so when Roosevelt was president, the Panama Canal came about, and that's a whole nother story. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you speak at all about the connection of Charles Howell?
I'm sorry, what?
Can you speak about the connection of the Goshenite?
I will be
Howell?
doing
Yes, yes, I know there's a connection, but there are people here that are much better versed at that than I am. About the Oregon played another role in history in the Boxer Rebellion. The Oregon and cruiser Newark landed a force of about 25 Marines from each ship under commands of 2 captains that marched to Peiping and helped defend the foreign compounds in Peiping when they were under siege for 55 days by the Boxers. So the Oregon played a role in that story. If anybody's ever seen the movie 55 Days at Peiping, okay, any other questions? Yes.
How many casualties were there, like in the Spanish-American War?
There were quite a few casualties, but not horrendous.
Right.
You know, the fighting was over within a month.
But like disease and all that. I'm sure.
July. Because I don't have the numbers in my head. They could be looked up. But as I know, disease created more casualties, took more people out of action.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Would you briefly talk about how Roosevelt went from the Secretary of the Navy to a Lieutenant Colonel in the Army?
Yes, he did that by recruiting a regiment and got an appointment. He really wanted to experience war, to experience combat. He was a true warmonger and a romantic. He viewed war as being very romantic and one of man's highest achievements, if you will. Yes.
You brought up the anthracite coal question, and a lot of the investigations have come back to bituminous coal and the hazards in the early steel ships like that. And the bituminous from the ports was subject to spontaneous combustion.
Exactly.
Because of the methane.
Exactly. Most of the ships did have, the Oregon had one bunker of anthracite coal, which actually came from, which surprised me, it came from Wales.
Yeah. It was
Probably got it in Hong Kong from the British, because that's where they were when they left to go to Manila.
So I looked at an engineering manual from 1918, and it said particularly Welsh coal, bituminous, could have fire damp or the methane. So, there's some credence to the coal itself igniting. And
I believe that was most likely the cause, probably electric spark. If you had a lot of coal dust, it's like grain dust, same thing. I have to be very careful with that. That most likely it was the grain dust because the grain bin at the top of the Orange County Brewery in Middletown exploded. And it was dust, electric spark from the dust. And that most likely, in my opinion, that arguably you can still say the Spanish, but Rick Overson thought no. And as I say, the Spanish really that was not in their best interest to do that.
Perhaps you might want to describe, if some of the people don't know, the difference between anthracite and bituminous coal.
Yeah, anthracite is much harder, burns cleaner, hotter. Bituminous coal has a lot of sulfur in it, and it smokes a lot.
Pyrite.
Yeah, it's not clean burning like anthracite. If there are no more questions, I will, yes.
Was the Havana Harbor actually mined?
No. The Spanish did not mine it. They actually had consented to have the Maine there, somewhat pressured, but they did consent. As I say, it would have not been in their interest to sabotage the Maine and provoke the United States. Yes.
Just looking at the replica there, it doesn't look like a warship. I don't see the big guns and all that. Was it a military warship?
That was a very modern ship at the time. Jackie Fisher, who was First Lord of the Admiralty for Great Britain, he joined the British Navy. He was born in Ceylon. His parents were in Ceylon as part of the colonial administration. He joined the Navy, I believe, at age 13, rose to the rank of admiral, and in the 1900s was First Lord of the Admiralty, and he oversaw a tremendous modernization of the British Navy into an all, when he joined the Navy, it was all wooden sailing ships. When he left a Navy that was all steel ships, and actually the first, what's considered to be modern battleship with the turrets that we're familiar with, was the HMS Dreadnought. And I think that was launched in 1911. I might be mistaken on that, but it was about that. And that was the first all-modern oil-fired turbine engines with, I believe, 12-inch guns, which were massive at the time. And that was considered the first modern battleship, yes.
About the model, since this gentleman brought it up. That model, as Mr. Growski had mentioned, was built on to scale from the original blueprints. That is not the ship that went down in Havana Harbor, because by the time that ship it had been modified a couple of times. But that's the original battle cruiser, the Maine. We call it a battleship. It was designated as a battle cruiser. We had no battleships. Like you said, the Dreadnought was the first battleship. If you'll notice, if you go over there and you go get close to that model, you'll see these little, they represent rivets. That model, I mean, when the ship was built, they didn't have welding. So all the steel plate was held on by rivets. That ship, that model shows all those rivets. And if you look, the rivets go all the way even underneath the keel, and it's on both sides. Tremendous job of building that ship. When I was at Annapolis, they had a model of the Maine similar to that, but it showed no rivets, just the paint job, the white above and the rust color below. That model is probably the most accurate model of the Maine ever.
And the Titanic was constructed with rivets too. That was the construction of that period. Yes,
That was a good question, because it's a transition ship.
Say again?
It's a great, it's a transition ship from monitors that we had earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Actually ships.
It has stationary guns and it has turret.
Yeah. And the turrets, if you notice, are starboard and port, and what they call an echelon. And this proved very unstable in
Yeah.
terms of stability. And so later on, our battleships went to centerline turrets. And accounts say the Maine was particularly in heavy seas. The front turret, the starboard turret, would pinch it into the trough too much. So it also lost some of the mast. Navy ships always had masts, you had sails, and it's a transition to
Yes.
modern.
the Olympia, which was Admiral Dewey's flagship in the Battle of Manila, is a museum down in Philadelphia, and you can actually board and tour that. And that's, if you really want to see what the battleships, although the Olympia was designated as a cruiser, but what they were like, that's well worth a visit.
It's
And then-
very much like the Maine.
Yes, and the battleship New Jersey is right across the river in Camden, New Jersey. Camden.
When was
Yes,
it built?
the,
When was it actually built?
I think it was about,
1890, they started it, and it took about 5 years to
Yeah.
complete. There was
Yeah, it was
delays on money
18,
funding and so forth.
1890s, yeah. All right, I will, yes.
Charlie, one observation, I grew up on Long Island, and Theodore Roosevelt was a hero to all of us youngsters growing up there, and started the National Park Services, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Loved the Adirondacks and
Yeah,
camping
yeah,
out.
the
And-
Catskill Preserve and Adirondack Preserve were created when he was governor.
But books I've read on him over the years, and watching Smithsonian Channel do a lifestyle on Theodore, you were totally right. He was a warmonger.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, you know, a lot of things happened when he was president. Interstate commerce, the railroads were brought under regulation, and, the trust busting, Standard Oil, he was quite a guy, no question about it. And he performed very well under battle. And that helped promote his future career because of the reporters of McClure's magazine that were with the regiment.
Now, he was president twice, too.
Yes. Well, he finished McKinley's term, 3 years, a little better, and then one term of his own. And he said that when he would only run for one term after McKinley's, but he later regretted that, and he had appointed Taft, Howard Taft, to be Governor General of the Philippines, and Taft did a splendid job of that. He was working to train the Filipinos to take over and govern themselves. That was the whole object why he was there. But when Taft was elected,